The story of Onan has echoed down through history, leaving an indelible mark on language, culture, and theology. His name itself has become synonymous with a particular act, forever linking him to the concept of onanism. But what was it about Onan's actions that provoked such a strong response from God? Was it merely the spilling of semen during intercourse? Or does Onan's story reveal something far deeper, a profound message about duty, responsibility, family, and divine purpose? To truly understand the significance of Onan's actions and their consequences, we must delve into the context of his story, the world in which it unfolded, and the values and beliefs that shape the lives of those involved. There are moments in the Bible that echo far beyond their time, stories so striking that they imprint themselves upon language, culture, and the moral imagination of generations. One such moment is the story of Onan, a man whose name has become etched into the dictionary itself, forever associated with Onan. Yet, what is it about his act that provoked such outrage from God? Was it simply the spilling of semen during intercourse? Or does Onan's story reveal something far deeper, a message about duty, responsibility, family, and divine purpose? This narrative raises questions that reverberate into the present day, touching upon discussions of sexuality, personal choice, and the ways we interpret ancient customs. Too often, Onan's story has been flattened into a simplistic debate over masturbation or contraception. But to truly understand it, we must step back into the world in which it unfolded and hear it as it was meant to be understood. In doing so, we uncover lessons that still resonate powerfully centuries later. Judah's family and the weight of lineage. To grasp the significance of Onan's actions, we need to understand the family he belonged to. Judah, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, would become the father of one of Israel's most important tribes. His lineage was not merely a family line but a thread woven into the prophetic fabric of Israel's destiny. From Judah's descendants would come King David, and according to Christian belief, the Messiah himself, Jesus Christ. This imbued Judah's family line with immense weight. It was more than personal, it was part of God's unfolding plan for the world. The continuity of his household was bound to the continuity of divine promises. Against this backdrop, the story of Judah's sons becomes not just a tale of family drama, but a narrative charged with spiritual and historical significance. The book of Genesis 38:6-10 tells the story directly. Judah found a wife named Tamar for his firstborn son, but Ut was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and God struck him dead. To preserve the family line, Judah instructed his second son, Onan, to marry Tamar and produce offspring in his brother's name. This was the practice of levirate marriage, a custom not rooted in mere tradition, but in sacred duty. The custom of levirate marriage in the ancient world, particularly within Israel. The death of a man without an heir created a crisis. Without children, his name, inheritance, and legacy would vanish. Levirate marriage provided the remedy. The brother of the deceased would marry the widow, and the first child born of that union would be counted as the heir of the dead brother. This was not an optional courtesy. It was a divine institution, a command that preserved the integrity of family inheritance and honored the memory of the dead. To fulfill it was seen as both duty and privilege. To refuse it was to deny not just the family, but also God's covenantal order. Onan's responsibility, therefore, was clear. He was to marry Tamar and raise children who would carry his brother's name. To do so would honor or protect Tamar and secure Judah's family line in accordance with divine law. But there was a cost. Any child born of this union would legally belong to not Onan. That child would inherit U's portion, reducing Onan's own inheritance and standing. What should have been an act of loyalty and sacrifice thus demanded Onan to set aside his own self-interest. Onan's rebellion? Onan did not refuse the marriage outright. He did marry Tamar and lay with her, but each time, he ensured no child would be conceived. Genesis tells us that whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground, to avoid raising offspring for his brother. On the surface, this might appear as nothing more than primitive birth control, but the deeper truth lies in the symbolism of his action. By deliberately preventing conception, Onan rejected his sacred duty. He used Tamar for his own gratification while withholding from her the future and security the law required him to give. He defied not just family expectations but divine command, and disregarded responsibility. In essence, Onan's act was not about sex alone. It was about selfishness. He chose his own gain over his brother's legacy, his own convenience over obedience to God, his own inheritance over the preservation of the covenant line. This rejection of duty done deliberately and repeatedly was seen by God as wickedness, and for it, God struck him dead. The spiritual consequences. Onan's punishment was immediate and severe. In the biblical record, very few sins lead directly to instant death by divine judgment. His inclusion in that small category underlines the gravity of his offense. It was not merely a personal failing, nor was it about the mechanics of intercourse. It was rebellion against God's order, contempt for family loyalty, and disregard for responsibility. In rejecting Tamar's right to bear a child for Onan disrupted not just his household, but the very line through which God had purposed to bless the nations. The lesson is sobering. God takes seriously the duties he ordains, especially those tied to covenant, loyalty, and selflessness. The story of Onan becomes a cautionary tale about the consequences of placing self-interest above divine expectations. Misinterpretations through the ages. For centuries, Onan's story has been interpreted through the lens of sexual morality. In many Christian traditions, it was read as a condemnation of masturbation or contraception, giving rise to the association of onanism with such acts. Yet a careful reading of Genesis reveals that the real issue was not contraception per se. Onan's sin lay in his refusal to fulfill his levirate duty. His spilling of seed was not condemned because of its biological nature, but because of what it represented: a rejection of his brother's legacy, a refusal of divine command, a selfish denial of responsibility. Thus, the story is less about sexual ethics and isolation, and more about the weight of obedience, the sacredness of duty, and the destructiveness of self-centeredness. The messianic implications. The story takes on even deeper meaning when viewed against the larger canvas of biblical history. Judah's family line was destined to carry the messianic promise. By refusing to give Tamar a child, Onan was not just shirking a duty to his brother, he was obstructing a divine plan. His choice threatened to cut off a line through which kings would be born, and, ultimately, through which Christ would come. While he could not derail God's purposes, his rebellion placed him in direct opposition to them. In this way, Onan unwittingly became a figure of resistance against the very Messiah he would have known nothing about. The lesson is stark. Individual choices can reverberate across generations, tangling with and sometimes hindering divine plans. Tamar's resilience. While Onan fell under judgment, Tamar emerges as one of the most remarkable figures in this story. Twice widowed, left childless, and vulnerable, she should have been protected by Judah's household. By law, Judah was to give her his third son, Shelah, once he was of age. Yet Judah hesitated, perhaps fearing that his last son might also die. Years passed, and Tamar remained neglected, her rightful place withheld. But Tamar refused to be erased. In a bold and unconventional move, she disguised herself as a prostitute and positioned herself along Judah's path. Unwittingly, Judah slept with her, leaving behind his staff, cord, and seal as collateral. When her pregnancy was later discovered, Judah condemned her to death until she produced the items he had left with her. In that moment of revelation, Judah recognized the truth. Tamar had acted more righteously than he. She had secured the future of the family when he had failed to fulfill his obligations. From Tamar came twin sons, Perez and Zerah. Through Perez, the line of Judah continued, leading generations later to David and, in Christian belief, to Jesus. Tamar's courage and determination preserved the very line through which God's plan for redemption would unfold. Lessons for today. The story of Onan, Judah, and Tamar speaks with relevance even now. It reminds us that obedience to God's commands is not negotiable, that responsibility to family and community is sacred, and that selfishness can have consequences far greater than we realize. Onan.